I'm John Romero, and I'm COO of Romero Games, and my role is chief production, some design, doing the audio, and game design and some programming.
I'm Brenda Romero, and I'm the game director for Empire Sin.
Can you tell us what inspired you to make this game?
It actually goes way back to when I was incredibly young. I mean, it was probably about 10 when I first became aware of a place called, unbelievably, The Place in Ogdensburg, New York. And so this is the oldest continuously operating bar in the U.S., never closed during Prohibition. And I remember asking my mom, well, why didn't it close? It had big windows in the front, still has big windows in the front. It made no sense to me. And she didn't want to explain how cops would look the other way and how politicians that drank there would look the other way. So she wanted to just, she didn't want to answer the question because she didn't want to pollute my mind. But what she ended up doing was setting off a fascination with criminal empires, which I still have to this day.
How many mob bosses can players choose, and what inspired you to pick those mob bosses for this game?
There's 14 mob bosses in the game. Probably about half of them are real from the time period, and the other half we've created.
In the 1920s, there was such an incredible array of different people that we had to choose from. So the more research we did, the more it was oh gosh, well, we can only have so many bosses, so this person's out, let's bring this person in. We wanted to make sure that we were representing all the different players at the table. So Goldie Garneau, she's a fictional character, but the French Canadians were playing a significant part in Prohibition, obviously, because alcohol was still legal there. And then we have, I would say, alt history bosses. So Stephanie St. Clair, she was a card shark and casino operator in New York, but I moved her to Chicago because it just happened to really like her and thought she was a cool character.
And do each of the bosses have their own attributes, strengths, weaknesses?
Yeah. So and not just that. I mean, they have things. Each one of them has a diplomatic bonus. So they have their predisposed strength or weakness with another faction, and then they also have 2 empire bonuses. So to take Conan, for instance, he has a bonus for brothels and for breweries. So they show up that way, and then hopefully when you think about let's just take Capone might want to work with Daniel McKee Jackson. You might want an early alliance with him because he's an expert in casino. So how might that work for you? But then if you ally with Daniel McKee Jackson, might this make Frank Reagan not interested in allying with you because Frank Reagan doesn't like Daniel McKee Jackson? And these are based on the way it was at the time, and they didn't care for each other. In each one of the bosses, whether they are factual or fictional, all of the bosses have backstories to them, issues that may or may not come up in the course of the play. So it has a rich story there as well.
What is the role for law enforcement in this game?
Well, they weren't pleased about it.
Yeah, we have the Bureau of Investigation, Bureau of Prohibition, and police in the game. They're kind of in one big faction, and they're like the unstoppable force that can tamp down on everybody that's in the game. You and the other bosses that you're going up against.
So you can have diplomacy with the boss. So they are actually in the diplomatic screen like any of the other factions. So they might say, let's just say you succeeded in paying the cops off. There is a possibility that you've done too much and now the heat's coming onto them, and so they could basically call you and say, they could contact you and say, look, things are getting pretty heated here. I'm going to need you to give me your biggest brewery. You need to take the heat down some. And so you have to manage the cops just like you manage all the other factions.
Will there be moles or rats in this game?
Yes, there are moles in the game. The cops, you're not around all of your crew all the time, and sometimes the cops will take somebody in and they may flip them and get all the information out of them, or they might just turn them and now you have a mole in your group, but you won't know until someone gives up some info or something happens, and now you got to accuse somebody of being a mole.
What about moles in terms of planting moles in other games, just so we can get information on them?
Oh, absolutely. That's a key part. It's not a key. It's one of the key things you can do with sabotage. You can infiltrate another gang and get a mole in another gang. That mole could reveal their safe house, could reveal the brewery, could reveal something that's important. You could sabotage them in some way, shape, or form.
But besides recruiting other gangsters, what are some of the other resources in this game?
Well, money, obviously. So you've got your crew. I guess other than your the crew that you've already mentioned, we've got money in the rackets that you own. You've got alcohol, which is the number one resource of Prohibition. It's the reason everybody's coming together. It's the reason you're forming these alliances. It's the reason the cops are ticked off at you. And there's also time, right? You've got 13 years to become king or queen of Chicago. That's how long Prohibition lasts. So in total, there are 60 different gangsters in the game. If you somehow succeed in killing 58 of them, you better work hard to finish it with the last 2. But the gangsters, they represent caricatures of people who lived during that time, people who were hoping to make a play for it. I mean, everybody from just your basic garden variety thugs to the super elite ex-military who are coming back from the Great War. So we've tried to make sure that there's a great collection of characters in there. They have specialties, as you might expect that they would have, professions, and so, and then they also have traits, and they evolve during the course of play. So it's possible that they can develop hair trigger temper. It's possible that they could become shell-shocked. It's possible they could fall in love. It's possible they can develop lifelong friendship. Well, game-long friendships anyway.
Alcoholism.
They could become alcoholic. There's all kinds of things that can happen in the game that affect the course of that playthrough.
So let's say something negative happens to one of my gangsters. They become trigger happy.
Yeah.
Can I correct their behavior, or do I need to fire them?
Well, it depends on what it is, right? Like, and I would say, like, that's not necessarily something that's negative. If you know how to use it, and you're like, you know what, I have a feeling that if I put so and so in this situation, and using what I know about them, this could actually work to my benefit. If I just don't care about it and I'm not managing it, it can work against me. But it can also work to your benefit. So it's a question of knowing who your characters are. And when you look in the character sheet, in the gangster sheet, you can actually see all of their different traits, how they got that way, the things that they're thinking, how loyal they are to you, what made them less loyal, what's making them more loyal. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with the characters. And it's not a question necessarily of negative. It's a question of how you use what's happened to them. And many of it, like John mentioned alcoholism earlier, alcoholic characters can sober up. You could sober them up quicker by put a doctor with them, put another sober character with them. That can make them better. So there are a few things that are absolutely stuck in stone. The characters are dynamic and they evolve during the course of play.
Can you spend some time talking about the combat mechanics of this game?
Sure.
Yeah, so we kind of modeled our combat after XCOM, where you have a combat grid and it's cover based. So you have half cover and full cover. What's interesting is when you're out on the street and it's a real-time world, so you have cars coming down the street and people walking around. As soon as you turn on combat, everything stops. The trucks and cars all stop. They become cover. You can strategically start and stop the combat until you feel like you're in a good place, and then take your first shot. Now you're really in combat, and you can't change it. But yeah, there's initiative based combat order at the top of the screen. You have your 2 action points that you can take. So you have like your 1 action point movement area, or your 2 action point movement area if you want to go really far. There's lots of items that you can use, or special abilities that you can use from your ability cards that you have, or the weapons that you've got. The weapons all have different qualities on them, kind of like an MMO where you have uncommon and rare, epic and legendary. So all the stuff in the game that you would do combat with has these quality levels.
I think the ability cards to me are like one of the super cool factors of the game, because while I love the weapons are from the Great War. There were a lot of interesting weapons coming into the U.S. and into Chicago that the gangs were using at that point in time. They were making their own zip guns. So the weapons that are available are quite varied. That said, each boss has their own ability card, and there's quite a few ability cards in the game. And the question is, you only have so many slots, so what card are you going to equip there? How are you going to use those things? There's some cards that might be just one-offs that you burn, and how are you going to use that? When are you going to use that? And so it adds an extra element to play that you need to think about.
The end goal is to basically dominate Chicago, and to get there, you mentioned it was 13 years. how does time flow in this game? Are you able to slow it down, pause it, increase the speed of it?
Yeah, you can pause the game. So if you feel like things might be moving a little too fast, or maybe the AI, you've turned the AI way up and you want to just like make sure you're pausing and making the right moves as fast as possible and then pausing again, you can do it that way. Or you can just turn the AI down and not have to worry so much. But time doesn't go like turbo speed through the game. You have to have enough time so you can read the newspaper, because we have a different newspaper in the game every month. So there's lots.
The game pauses when you do that.
Yeah.
That is not constantly happening.
How much time would it take to beat the game over the first playthrough?
I'm guessing about 10 hours. It's hard to say because there is a sandboxy element to the game. Some players are going to explore more than others. Some people are going to try to unpack every single person a mission that the RPCs come or the gangsters come with. And those players, it's going to take them longer because they just sort of want to be completist. And other players might just want to see how they can rise to number one and take out everybody else as fast as they possibly can.
And as soon as you get into combat, time kind of freezes. So you could, if you're in combat a ton of time during the game, not that much time is going to be passing.
So with 14 mob bosses, there's essentially 14 replay values. They each have their own story.
At the very least, and then 60 characters, 60 gangsters that you can bring in. You can't have all 60 gangsters at one time. Each gangster has a certain amount of take, and then they kick the rest up to the boss. So there's only so much money you have to go around. So you can only have so many gangsters on your payroll at one time.
Would there be like a leaderboard so I can compare my final score?
Yeah. In fact, you see it. There's multiple leaderboards in the game, so you can see in the diplomacy screen who, like empire-wise, is at the top. In each one of when you're looking in the financial screen, you can see who's doing the best with casinos, who's doing the best with breweries. So there's multiple leaderboards in the game.
How far along are you in the development of this right now?
Between alpha and beta.
Yeah.
And will this be coming out on the Nintendo Switch?
Yes. Yeah, we've had the game running on the Switch for over a year now. So we have one person whose whole job is just making that Switch version faster and faster and faster and faster. And it's not a port, it's the game that we play on the PC running on the Switch.
When's the tentative launch date for this?
First half of next year?
Yeah. 2020.
2020.
Who owns the IP for this? It's developed by your studio.
Yeah, I believe it's Paradox.
No, it's definitely.
Yeah, it's Paradox.
I believe it is Paradox. Yeah. I mean, we came up with the idea, but games, you want to get a great partner to make a game, and so Paradox especially if you look at the games that they've made, you look at the success of those games. I feel very fortunate that we were working with Paradox, and this is Paradox IP.